Alright, let's do reaction videos. One of who got away from murder then killed again.
Core Power has 26 grams of high-quality protein to help you recover and build muscle. Did you know there are world championships for playing air guitar? Want to build your own band, record your first album, and become a... When I look at cases for this channel, my first thought is always how it must be so awful for the families that have suffered the loss of a loved one. To have someone taken away in mysterious, often cruel ways, and never truly knowing why. The case we're looking at today is a little different. It started with the death of a man, Andrew Bagby, who was so loved and cherished by everyone that when he was gunned down in a parking lot, it inspired a movie. But that isn't where the story ended. After his killer was allowed to walk free, she went on to kill again. Let's dive in. Andrew Bagby was born on September 25th, 1973, and he was the only child of his parents, David and Kathleen Kate Bagby. Andrew grew up in San Jose, California, and from a young age he was surrounded by friends and loved making movies. According to Kurt Cohen, his childhood friend who later decided to direct a movie about Andrew's life, Andrew loved to play the bad guy. He must be a smart boy. But in real life, he wasn't a bad guy at all. He was smart, kind, and funny. As he went through life, Andrew seemed to leave an impression on everybody he met and was considered an all-around good guy. He even used the money he saved for medical school to invest in Kurt's filmmaking. From a young age, he was interested in working in the medical field. His mom, Kate, was a nurse, and her ability to help people inspired Andrew. He studied medicine at Memorial University in Newfoundland, Canada. It was there, during his third year in 1999, that he met Dr. Shirley Turner. Shirley was 12 years older than Andrew. She was twice divorced and had 3 children. When the two of them got together, Andrew's friends and family thought it was a pretty odd match.
It's kind of appeared, and then she was there all the time, all of a sudden.
And just didn't seem suited for him.
However, after a difficult breakup with his ex-fiancée, many were just happy that he was dating again. Andrew and Shirley were classmates at medical school. Both were bright and had, at times, controversial senses of humor, and the two grew close quickly. In August 2000, Shirley graduated and was offered a job in Sac City, Iowa. Earlier that year, Andrew started a surgical residency at a hospital in Syracuse, New York, and the relationship became long distance. Despite the distance, they tried to make things work as best they could, and Shirley visited Andrew a lot. However, there were already signs that Andrew was starting to pull away, as he only visited Shirley once in Iowa. In fact, at the beginning of all this, their relationship was never meant to be anything serious. Kurt remembers Shirley telling him just that. She said, "Look, I'm not looking for another husband. I'm just looking for somebody to hang out with and have fun here in school." For months, Andrew tried to ease out of the relationship with Shirley, but she just kept coming back, never taking no for an answer. In October 2001, Andrew thought he'd finally make it clear to Shirley that he didn't want to see her anymore. But then, just a few weeks later, she turned up at a friend's wedding, totally unexpected, and spent the whole night pretending Andrew asked her to be there as his date. He was too nice to tell her otherwise. The day after, Andrew drove her to the airport and put her on a plane back to Iowa, and tried to make it clear to Shirley that things between them were over for good. Just 2 weeks later, she turned up on his doorstep again, totally out of nowhere. After he got her to leave, the first thing Andrew did was contact his close friend, Clark Simpson.
Elliot, when I break up with somebody and put them on a plane and send them 1,300 miles away, I said, they knock on my front door, I'm going out the back door and I'm calling the police.
But Andrew didn't call the police. Instead, he agreed to meet Shirley one more time to talk things out and hopefully finally get her to realize that they were over. No one knows what he said to her when they met up that evening, but we do know what Shirley did next. Andrew's body was discovered the next day, lying face down next to his car. He had 5 bullet wounds and a blunt force injury to his head. Straight away, Shirley was a suspect. Shirley had just purchased the same model of gun that had been used to snuff out Andrew. And when questioned by the police, she said she bought the gun for protection, but had since lost it. Pretty convenient, right? She also claimed to be home in Iowa the day Andrew died, and said she was at home sick. Many people contradicted this statement, either because they saw Shirley in the area or Andrew told them about her visit. Unfortunately, it wasn't enough to charge her. The authorities wanted to check Shirley's cell phone records, which would tell them where she really was when this happened. However, in the early 2000s, it took 2 weeks for this data to be processed, and in that time, Shirley fled the US and went back to Newfoundland. The data eventually came back and showed that not only was Shirley not in Iowa, but she'd been in Andrew's neighborhood the day he died. With this information, the US police formally charged Shirley with causing Andrew's death and sent a request to the Canadian authorities to have her sent back to the US for trial. On the same day she was charged, Shirley was let out on bail as she wasn't deemed a flight risk. I guess they forgot about that part where she ran home to Canada so the US police couldn't arrest her. As all this was happening, Kate and David Bagby made an extreme decision. They quit their jobs and moved from California to Newfoundland to oversee the whole process of getting Shirley sent back to the US. But that wasn't their only reason. They also received the news that Shirley was pregnant with their first and only grandchild. Already, they were planning to go for full custody of the baby. This was the turning point that inspired Kurt to make his movie so that Andrew's child would be able to get to know their dad and understand what truly happened to him when they were old enough. Zachary Andrew Turner was born on July 18th, 2002. From the get-go, Shirley did everything in her power to stop Kate and David from seeing Zachary, but they were already on their way to family court to get Zachary taken away from her. In the following months, it became clear just how strong these two people were. They didn't just try to rip Zachary away from Shirley, they negotiated with her to give themselves a better chance. At first, they were granted 1-hour monitored visit with Zachary per week. Shirley was reportedly terrified they were going to do something to him, whether that meant harming him or trying to steal him. As a result, they had to consent to a full search every time they visited. They loved Zachary from the second they saw him, and it only motivated them more to get custody of him. As this was happening, Shirley was still living as a free woman, as she still hadn't gone to trial over Andrew's death. It hadn't even been decided if she was going to be sent back to the US yet. In November 2002, a judge decided
What's with all the creepy characters? Just my old insurance choices haunting me.
that a jury would most likely find Shirley guilty and ordered for her to be incarcerated. This was a big win for Andrew's parents, who finally felt like the case was getting somewhere and Zachary was temporarily placed in their custody. 2 months later, Shirley submitted an appeal and was again released on bail. At the hearing, Andrew's parents couldn't believe what they were hearing. There is no indication of a psychological disorder that would give concern about potential harm to the public, generally, as her crime, while violent, was specific in nature. So basically, they accepted Shirley was guilty of killing Andrew, but they weren't worried about her committing any other crimes because her target was gone. If only they knew how wrong they were. Andrew's parents had to give Zachary up to Shirley again. They once again negotiated times when they could visit with Zachary, who became super attached to Kate, which made Shirley very bitter. Since she couldn't work, Shirley relied on Kate and David to pay for everything Zachary needed, all while continuing to say that they were trying to turn him against her. Her true feelings towards Kate and David became pretty clear at Zachary's first birthday party.
She said, "He loves you more than me, why don't you take him?"
A lot of people found her possessiveness over Zachary super weird, especially since she'd literally abandoned her 3 other kids to go to medical school. But they continued to work around it in the hope that one day Shirley would be behind bars and Zachary wouldn't have to grow up in their weird environment. Then, the unthinkable happened. It was August 18th, 2003, 1 month after Zachary's first birthday, when he and Shirley went missing. At first, everyone thought she fled the country again to avoid going to an upcoming hearing, which would have taken place on Andrew's 30th birthday. In the months prior, Shirley had a new man in her life, and things seemed to be going well until he learned she'd been charged with first-degree homicide, and he tried to break things off. Like with Andrew, she refused to acknowledge this and spent the next couple of weeks calling him and driving past his house. She even told him she was pregnant so he would speak to her, but this turned out to be a lie. That day, she drove to his house with Zachary, but when she got no for an answer, she parked her car close by and headed to a nearby pier. It's believed she left her car there to frame the man. She gave herself and Zachary a high dose of Ativan, which made him fall asleep. Then she jumped. The next day, they were found on a rocky beach a short distance away. When the police arrived, they wrapped Zachary in a blanket rather than a body bag and made sure to keep his remains away from Shirley's. Over 400 people attended Zachary's funeral. Kate and David took his ashes with Andrew's and scattered them together. Some were scattered in England, where Kate is from, and some in St. Louis, where David is from. After that, they challenged the system. David and Kate were certain if Shirley hadn't been allowed out on bail or have custody of Zachary, he would have been saved. Not only was Shirley a killer, but she threatened the life of the man she was seeing before she died, and 8 people have restraining orders against her. While incarcerated, she even threatened other inmates, and none of this was considered when her bail was set. We believe Shirley Turner bears 100% of the responsibility for the murder of our son, Andrew. We believe that the legal system helped her to kill our grandson, Zachary. They made it their mission to change the law, so it would be harder for people charged with being physically harmful to get bail. In 2011, Bill C-464 was passed, which added a clause that said bail could be denied to protect the life of someone under the age of 18. In 2006, an investigation concluded that Zachary was failed by social services and some actions could have been taken to save him. Although their campaigning has had some positive results, they're still angry that more wasn't done when Zachary was alive. Shirley never had to face justice for what she did to Andrew and was able to manipulate the law in her favor when it came to Zachary. Kate and David have now moved back to California, but still visit Newfoundland sometimes to see the friends they made during their time there. In the U.S., they stay in close contact with all of Andrew's friends, who all consider themselves to be Kate and David's kids, one way or another. That brings us to the end of today's video. This case was super
messed up. Alright guys, I will we see my boyfriend, so I'll see you then.